Welcome everyone to DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for this afternoon. I encourage you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Use the hashtag DisrupTV to ask questions of Ray, myself, and our extraordinary guests. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wong, best-selling author of a book titled Disrupting Digital Business. He's a Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and ZDNet contributor, founder, CEO of Constellation Research, and you can follow Ray on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray.
Hey, thanks a lot, Vala. Here joined by my awesome co-host, Vala Afshar. And if you don't know him, he is the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce, but also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business Excellence, a Huffington Post top blogger, and of course, influencer of CXOs, CMOs, CIOs around the world. So who do we have for our guest today?
It is our pleasure to have, when we talk about influence, one of the most influential former CIOs in the world, Joanna Young, Digital Executive Advisor at jcycio.com. Joanna is an Executive Digital Advisor. She was named Huffington Post Top 10 Social CIOs on Twitter in the world. Joanna has held C-level positions in insurance and higher education, managing technologies from application delivery to infrastructure to service management. She works with organizations to plan and achieve digital strategies in all era of accelerating change. She's known for her customer-first, employee-engaged style, and Joanna works with organizations ranging from Fortune 100 to local government. She blogs on leadership, technology, and related topics at jcycio.com. You can also follow her on Twitter, which is a must, personal recommendation, at jcycio. Welcome to DisrupTV, Joanna.
Hey, it's great to be with you guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm wicked excited, as we say in Boston.
Wicked.
She's a wicked wildcat too. And
yes, I am. I even have my UNH cup right here. Go Cats.
Go Cats. So awesome. Well, hey, you're one of the most prominent folks out there evangelizing STEM, evangelizing women in technology, diversity of thought. One of the things that we're always advocating is the need for digital artisans, people coming from different points of view, right? Because one of the things around innovation is in design thinking, you've got to be able to come from different points of empathy, different points of perspective, and really that thought process becomes important. So tell us why it's important, like in terms of the diversity, in terms of the gender diversity, why it's important, and where does it make business sense?
Yeah, so I'm very passionate about women in tech, and I talk a lot about gender diversity and technology. Women obviously are 50% of the population, yet they only represent 25% of the people who work in technology. And as you rise up the leadership ranks, that percentage gets smaller and smaller. On the the other side of that coin, there's a lot of proof that companies who have diversity, particularly at the board level, at the C-suite level, perform better. They outperform the competitors. So this is something that I'm not passionate about just because I'm a woman, but I'm passionate about it because it makes business sense. If you're going to continue to be competitive and continue to have talent that adds value, you've got to pay attention to all segments of the population. One of the things that's particularly disturbing to me is that the percentage of young women who are entering computer science programs is actually going down. It's been on a downward trajectory. Yeah, ever since it's in the 2000s. And so, this is something that we've really got to turn around. It makes sense locally, it makes sense nationally, it makes sense for individual organizations.
Does it mirror the trend of people just going to STEM based on like U.S. born versus immigrants, or is that decline even bigger than just that average?
I think that other countries, particularly in Asia and India, actually, they are doing better than the U.S. in terms of this trend. They are encouraging and educating women to get into these fields. In the U.S., we're not doing, in my view, as great a job, all the way from, if you will, elementary school, all the way up to once women get into the workplace. For example, women leave technology jobs at higher rates than men, and you can point to a number of differences in the workplace that women experience that for are causing them to actually leave tech jobs at higher rates. So if you think about it, they're not entering the jobs at high enough rates, but they're leaving the jobs at higher rates. This is something that we need to address if we want to have high performing technology workforce.
No.
Joanna, why do you think that is, and what can parents?
Yeah, well, there's 3 reasons that research tells us. It's gender stereotypes, sadly. There's some studies that say even in 1st grade, boys are reinforced that they're better at math and science and those sorts of things than girls, which is really sad. The talent pool, as I've just discussed, there's not enough female talent in the pipeline. And also, sadly, there are studies that show that you get this sort of in-group favoritism. One colleague of mine said, Joanna, there's not going to be more women in technology until there are more women in technology. And so it's going to be
the beating will continue unless morale improves.
Right, exactly. So, I consider it, part of my mission and part of my passion to be encouraging girls and young women all along the spectrum. One of the things I really encourage companies to do is that they need to get more involved. They can be involved all the way to offering scholarships for, technology camps at the middle school level, all the way up to offering, internships and, sort of job bridging programs for, young women who are in college or in master's programs. So companies really need to get involved across the entire spectrum.
Makes a lot of sense.
Great advice.
Yeah.
So you're also talking about the need. I mean, we're basically trying to improve the pool, sort of improve the opportunities, right? You're looking for getting people up to the same level. Now, part of that is really getting to lifelong learning, right? I mean, our careers change. Think about the massive pace of change in technologies. I always do this as a fun thing in my conferences and events. I ask people, hey, who got an iPhone in 2006? And you're like, half the audience will raise your hands. And I'm like, no, it didn't come out to 2007, but it didn't even matter, right? I mean, that's the point. I mean, things are changing so quickly. And because of that change, lifelong learning is an important piece to individual success. What are some things people need to do? Right? We know it's important. We know people have to get there. But how do they take those actions to adjust with the times, adjust with the new business models, adjust with the fact that, your personal growth needs are also changing? Exactly.
So your individual, ultimately we're accountable for our own career. So, you're an individual, if you're in a job, you need to be thinking about, okay, 6 months from now, 12 months from now, how am I going to be able to be contributing at the same level, never mind a greater level, because the pace of change is happening so quickly. So it's really important as individuals to say, okay, what skills do I need to acquire in the next, in the next few months or the next year, so that I can remain, personally proficient at what I need to be doing. And then you need to be, frankly, assertive with the leadership in your organization to say, hey, this is what I need, and the reason I need it is so that I can contribute at a higher level for you, for the organization. So you need to, make that connection between the personal career achievement and the organization's career achievement. I have to tell you, anecdotally, I am often very surprised at organizations that I come in that have been neglecting their IT talent. They figure, hey, for whatever reason, they think they've got what they need. And one of the first things I'll ask is, how are you handling people's objectives? How are you handling people's development plans? And I'll often get answers like, well, we haven't really been paying attention to that. And I explain to them that if you're not paying attention to that, number one, your employees' ability to contribute is going to go on a downward trajectory. And number two, you are not going to get the level of employee engagement. You're not going to be able to recruit and retain people. When you're talking about people coming into the workplace, they may be coming in with modern and contemporary skills. If they see that others around them don't have some parity of skills, they may say, wow, I'm not sure I want to stay in this place. Because you don't really want to be the smartest person in the room all the time, right? You want to be surrounded by people who are smarter than you in different and multiple areas. So employees need to take that accountability. But again, leadership and companies need to make sure that they have processes and policies in place to say, hey, these are the skills we're going to need, tomorrow, next month, next year, and they need to make sure that they are sourcing that talent both by focusing on their existing employees' development and, of course, hiring for the skills they need or sourcing them in alternate ways.
Sure. Joanna, you have transitioned from being a CIO of some of the largest organizations to now a digital advisor. And in your new role, what are some of the challenges, obstacles that you see companies face in terms of adopting emerging new technologies and going through a successful transformation process?
It's really interesting. As I was pondering that question over the past couple of days, I've been doing this sort of work for over 20 years now, so that's quite an arc. I started when mainframes were still prevalent, and we were moving to client server, and then the internet came along, and so I've seen all those iterations all the way to the current trend of moving to the cloud. And I think it's interesting that some of the same basic problems are still not really solved yet. For example, every so often I'll go out and look at success rates of IT projects. They still hover around kind of that 70-75 percent range of projects that don't succeed.
Wow.
And so we have to, and so when I look at the challenges that organizations face, talent, as we've discussed, is certainly one of them. I think one of the challenges is that CIOs and IT organizations really, when people say to me, well, do I have different problems than other organizations? I'm like, no, you all have the same problems. You just have them to varying degrees. And CIOs are trying to still manage legacy systems, particularly in the ERP space. And then they're under a lot of pressure, obviously, to deliver new solutions, analytics in particular. And so they're trying to manage all these things. At the same time, some of these same problems still exist in terms of rates of projects. So how I try to help people is say, okay, let's first of all look at the basics. Do you have the basics in your organization? A classic one is IT service management, ITSM, using the ITIL framework. I'm still amazed at the number of organizations that don't have some of those standard and best practices in place to some degree. They may not have service catalogs. They may not be, monitoring and measuring things like customer satisfaction. I saw this great quote recently, Vala, which I think you and Ray will appreciate, which is, it goes on the lines of, your customers are only going to be happy if your employees are happy, right? If if your employees are really truly engaged. So if you don't have these basics in place, I find it hard to believe that organizations are going to be able to deliver effectively with social, mobile, analytics, and cloud.
Got it. And hey, related to the role, we often talk about the 4 personas of a CIO, right? Sometimes you're the chief infrastructure officer, sometimes you're the chief integration officer, sometimes you're the chief intelligence officer, sometimes you're the chief innovation officer. Do you see a shift in those roles? Like integration, people are trying to keep trying to get the outside stuff back into the organization, not just the internal integration, but the fact that, 60% of all the data, that we have today may be accessed versus owned by 2020. So it's not in our 4 walls. Chief infrastructure officer, data center person, chief intelligence person, getting the right information to the right person at the right time in the right form factor, and the right security model, of course. And then the chief innovation officer trying to figure out all these transformation efforts. Do you see a shift in what's happening there?
Yeah, I absolutely see a shift. I think the CIO has to be many things to many people, and we're called upon to keep the lights on and deliver in the ways that you've just described, Ray. One of the things that I've seen and been counseling people on is that they have to think about the selection and procurement and then the management of a lot of these new technologies in a completely different way. And when you think about these multiple roles of a CIO, one of the things that is, if you will, is multi-threaded through all those personas, as you would say, is that you have to have really excellent relationships. I'm fond of saying to vendors, you know, I don't want us to be a vendor and a customer. You know, I want us to be a partner. I want us to be aligned on this, on the same goals. And these days, where, to your point, you know, a lot of the data is, you know, outside the four walls. You're getting it from different sources, whether it's, you know, social media or other sorts of platforms. That means that CIOs have to have a greater understanding than ever before about how to create these effective partnerships, starting all the way from, you know, basic contract terms and conditions, all the way to, you know, managing those relationships and hopefully getting more value out of them over time. And, you know, one of the things that CIOs need to realize in their multiple personas is that they need to influence new and different skill sets outside of their own organization.
Yeah.
You need new and different skill sets in your marketing organization. You need new and different skill sets in your legal department to help you with some of these contracts and these other nuances. You need new and different skill sets in your purchasing and your procurement function. You need, you know, in your lines of business, you need people who, you know, better understand these new platforms and digital frameworks. So it's important as a CIO to realize that, you know, if you as a CIO have an amazing organization, that's not going to be enough. You need to be influencing these new and different skill sets throughout the entire organization.
Sure. And as you know, the best teachers are lifelong students. So even if you're a CIO, a prominent CIO like yourself, I'm sure that you had your circle of individuals that you would collaborate with to help shape and influence your vision of the future. In terms of mentoring, can you give us some advice to our viewers? You know, how do you select a mentor? What does a good mentor do in order to ensure your success? And what do you have to do as a mentee to ensure that there's a mutual benefit in the relationship?
Well, number one is find someone and ask them to be your mentor. People are often very flattered and honored if you call them or reach out to them and say, hey, I would like you to mentor me. That's number one. Number two is you need to look in both likely and unlikely places. I mean, likely places are, you know, people who are in your organization, other leaders in the organization. But number one, if you're an IT person, find a mentor who's not an IT person. You know, find someone marketing, find someone in a line of business, find someone maybe in a competitor, you know, because, you know, find someone in your network that may even work in a different vertical. So you need to look in both likely and unlikely places, and you need to have more than one mentor. I think it is important to have a mentor within your organization because there are going to be things about leading in your organization that it's helpful to have that, you know, that same framework and set of, you know, objectives. But it's also equally important to have mentors completely outside the organization. What's important is that mentors should not be cheerleaders. They can be supportive, but they shouldn't just be, you know, yeah, you're wonderful, you're great. They need to be constructive critics. So you need to find someone that you feel comfortable with saying, hey, I'm having this problem, or I did this thing that, you know, seemed like it was going to work out really well, but it didn't. And you need to have someone who's going to ask you the tough questions and who's going to be able to reflect on what you did, you know, and how you did it, and tell you, you know, this is what you need to change. This is what you need to adjust to improve your chances of success. So asking, looking in likely and unlikely places, making sure you don't just have a cheerleader that you've got a constructive critic. And last but not least, pay it forward. Once you've been mentored, you know, find ways to mentor others. That's
great advice. I love that. I love that piece. Yeah, it's about giving. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Is this why you blog, and is this why you're so social and active on Twitter and you speak at events? Is this part of you? I mean, what motivates you to be so accessible? What drives you to do that?
Well, first of all, I'm an extrovert, so I sort of naturally, I just love interacting with people and meeting new people. It's totally awesome. But yeah, I do like to give. Part of it is that I want to be able to tell, my story and be able to offer some of the benefits of my experience, and hopefully other people can learn, maybe avoid some of the mistakes I've made. Certainly the whole women in tech and people in tech thing, I want to encourage more people to get into the field. But the other piece, frankly, is, you and I have talked about this before, Vala, is that frankly, being social allows me to increase my own contribution. Every time, every Twitter interaction, every Facebook interaction, LinkedIn interaction, whatever the case may be, I'm learning from that. I'm learning from the questions people ask me. I'm learning from looking at other people's posts that they share with me. And so, I like to think that I've been better able to help, organizations because I've been social. And that's why I'm so passionate about encouraging other people to engage and participate.
Great. Well, hey, Joanna, thank you so much for being on the show. You can follow Joanna at JCYCIO. Definitely come on back. We love having you here. Love getting those different perspectives. And, welcome to the club.
Oh, thank you. And it's great to see you guys. Have a wonderful day and a happy holiday next week.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Great having you. Come back, please.
Great to see you. Absolutely. Thanks. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Wait, where are you, Jay? I mean, look at this. We're going to have to do some intros, but look at that weather. What is that? Anyways.
Oh, you're on mute. I think you're on mute.
We'll have to take him off mute. Let's see. Very cool. Well, hey, our next guest is someone very fun, someone who was at our Constellation Connected Enterprise event. Vala, we'll let you do the honors on Jay, but we're really excited to have him back.
It's awesome to have Jay Goldman on DisrupTV with almost 20 years of experience in leveraging technology to build culture of human achievement. Jay's a co-author of a New York Times best-selling book titled The Decoded Company, Know Your Talent Better Than You Know Your Customers. He's a co-founder of Sensei Labs at Click Inc. Jay focuses on reinventing technology of management, introducing new ways for companies to execute and evolve faster. He previously headed up marketing for Ripple, venture-backed startup acquired by Salesforce, a great company. Jay,
I've heard of them. I've heard of them.
A tiny plug. Jay also wrote the O'Reilly Facebook Cookbook, has been published in Harvard Business Review, has spoken at TEDx, Google, Twitter World Headquarters. You can follow Jay on Twitter at Jay Goldman, JayGoldman. Welcome, Jay, to DisrupTV. Oh, we can't hear you. I don't know what's going on. There must be some.
We're on mute with Jay, but if we can unlock Jay, that would be great.
Jay, can you try refreshing your browser, please?
Yeah. So while Jay's refreshing his browser, what we're looking in the background is that's Toronto. Can you believe that, Vala? We're in Toronto.
I was in Toronto this week, and what an awesome city. And I stayed in Toronto for only 2 days, but I'm going back in January, so looking forward to it.
What weather? I mean, is that what did you get? Was it like 60s, 70s back there? So.
Yeah, I was walking around without a jacket, and it was like summertime. It was pretty unbelievable. At least Monday and Tuesday. It looks like the same now.
Well, this is really cool. Well, Jay he's the managing director of Sensei Labs at Click, and one of the reasons we brought him out to CCE is because he's been doing a lot of work around innovation, a lot of work around culture, and I think it's a very, very cool area to talk about. And it's Click Health and Sensei Labs are doing some very interesting things, and I think a lot of people might not know who they are outside of Canada. And so, but they're big in North America. But outside of the rest of the world, they're going to see some very interesting innovation and things that they have in place. I mean, they've basically been doing a lot of cool things. And one of the books that he wrote was really The Decoded Company, which is something very, very cool. I mean, Sensei Labs, Decoded Company, is really looking at how to get the most out of human potential, how to get the most out of creativity and innovation. And so we can get the line back up and get Jay on.
Can you guys
Jay?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Awesome. I don't know if you could hear us, but we were talking about how to become a decoded company, talent-centric, data-driven, flexible, and fast. Tell us a little bit about your book before we dive into the questions.
Sure. We wrote The Decoded Company really about our experience building Click up to the company that it is today. We're nearly 700 people now, North America focused, as Ray mentioned. So we work primarily in the health sector and life sciences. We help biotech and pharma companies to commercialize their products. And we will do that through various different marketing channels, strategy, we'll help them with brand development, all that kind of stuff. And so as we've grown the company, we've really focused heavily on culture and on people. And we take a digital native approach to management, a very updated approach to thinking about how to lead people, how to inspire them, how to engage them, very data-driven and very talent-centric approach to doing that. And so over the last 20 years of Click's life, where we celebrate our 20th anniversary in April, we have really grown and perfected a set of skills around how to engage people and how to understand that engagement. And we thought it was time maybe to share that story because we get asked about it a lot, and we've had lots of folks who have wanted to come and visit Click, as Ray recently did, and have a chance to sort of see how things actually work here. And so we wrote the book, not just about ourselves, about lots of other companies that are doing similar sorts of things, really divided up into three sort of core principles. Technology as a coach, the idea that the technology that we use day to day in our lives, products like Salesforce, like many of the other ones out there, are evolving to the point where they can go from being referees that really just yell at us when we break business rules to being coaches who are really biased towards our performance and can whisper in our ear and coach us to achieve a higher level of success.
So you were talking about technologies that are now maybe the hottest word in 2016 is artificial intelligence. Augmented intelligence. Is that where the spirit of technology as coaches, where you can discover, anticipate, predict, recommend? Was that the genesis of it?
Yeah, although I think that this even predates AI. You don't need to go all the way to AI to be able to do this. It's certainly helpful, and we're experimenting a lot with machine learning and neural nets and all that kind of stuff. But you can actually get here even with some relatively simple business rules, just around identifying the patterns of behavior that lead to problems or issues coming up, and then being able to help people to avoid those as early as possible. We think of it as the sort of virtual canary in the coal mine. It's the early warning detection system that says, hey, wait a minute, the last time this series of things happened, something bad happened afterwards, so you should look out for this series of events. And you think about any achievement that humans are, sort of big sporting event achievements, CEOs who have been very successful, almost all of them have a coach or multiple coaches who are helping them to achieve that level of success. We never really get there entirely on our own, but for most people, the vast majority of people in organizations today, they don't have coaches. There's nobody there to help them achieve that, and we think technology can fill that gap in a very scalable way.
That's absolutely, and then talent is a sixth sense engineering ecosystem with the last two pillars.
Data as a sixth sense, yeah.
Data as a sixth sense,
Really, data as a sixth sense is sort of the idea that we are all becoming data scientists, whether we like it or not. I think, that I've heard lots of funny things about data scientists recently, that it's the hottest job in the world right now. And so lots of people who weren't data scientists yesterday are suddenly data scientists today because they were really mathematicians before, or statisticians or physicists, and they just changed their job title, and now they're suddenly data scientists. But I think the rest of us who aren't mathematicians, and I'm definitely not one, are becoming data scientists because that's what the world is today. And so the idea of data as a sixth sense is, first of all, that data literacy. How do you help people to understand data in a way that's meaningful? But then also, how do you engineer systems so that you give exactly the right data to the right person at the right time, which allows them to make better decisions faster? And better decisions faster is really the ultimate goal out of what everybody is really doing with data.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, getting to precision decisions and getting to them quickly. So that's a good point about big data, right? How do we shift out of this big data lens from being, less inward to understanding your employees to understanding your customers? You do a few things. You go deep digital, but you also have the human factor as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is about people. So, you can look at all of the digital body language that you want to look at, but at the end of the day, people are, to use Dan Ariely's term, predictably irrational. And so, all the data isn't going to necessarily help you to understand why somebody did something, but it will tell you what they did. So you can't take the human element out of any of this. And everything that we do is in pursuit of helping people to be better, to achieve more, to be able to do things faster than they were able to do it. But ultimately, it's still about people. So we look at it as If you take data directly from people, if you look at self-reported data, as most systems do, we're not necessarily, for example, big fans of employee engagement surveys because you're asking people to report about their level of engagement, and there's some level of bias that will always be part of the answers that they put into that survey, which means that no matter how carefully you word and structure the questions, you're not getting real data about people's engagement, you're getting a filtered perspective of that. And so we talk actually at length in the book about really the difference between self-reported data and what we call ambient data, the data that comes out of the systems around us as we're using them without that level of bias that we might otherwise put into there. Self-reported data is useful at large quantities of it, but it's not useful when there is that risk of bias. Ambient data is useful even at a small quantity because it can tell you a lot about people's real behavior, but it still won't get to.
So it's the difference between what people say they're doing and what they really did.
Exactly, right? So you think about market research surveys, and marketing firms have known this for a long time. You ask people whether they like your shampoo, and they say, sure, I like your shampoo. But then you look at their Twitter account, and when they're standing in the shampoo aisle at the pharmacy or drugstore or wherever making a purchase, they say terrible things about your shampoo, or they tweet pictures of somebody else's shampoo, and they say, this is my favorite shampoo. And that's the difference between asking people their opinion about something and then just observing the real world behavior that they actually exhibit. So we try to take that ambient data, but then we always try to layer that personal side on it. So we, for example, at Click, despite being 700 people, don't have an HR department. We don't think that
700 people, no HR. How does it work?
Come on, really?
Is it self-governing?
Yeah, well, we're Canadian, so we get away with all these things.
Less lawsuits.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that there are functions that HR serves that are very, very important in an organization, and some of those functions are what we would think of as the more sort of administrative side of HR, so payroll, benefits, that sort of thing. We took those functions and we gave them to our finance team because they were already doing a lot of that kind of work, and so it made sense to extend the work into that way. And then we took the side of HR, which often gets lost. It's not the side that's administrative, and it's not the risk mitigation side of HR, which we believe serves the purpose of the organization, but not the people inside of it. So we took the other part, which is culture and growth, the part that almost always gets ignored in favor of risk mitigation and administrative function, and we built a department around that. And their measurement is engagement. How much are they able to enrich the lives of Clicksters, to deliver what we call Click moments to them so that everybody has those special moments on a regular basis that make working in this organization special. We scale that team alongside the rest of the organization. So our talent advocates have a relationship with probably, generally speaking, about 70 to 100 Clicksters. So as the organization grows, the number of talent advocates grow alongside of it. And those personal relationships that they can have at that size really help them to understand the life of those people, to help them through maybe some harder things that they're going through, to help celebrate the successes that they have, and to augment their own leaders. They're not there to replace our team leads who do an amazing job of leading their teams, but to augment them with some additional capabilities that they might not otherwise have. And a lot of that is data driven, but it is that personal element that Ray was talking about.
So Joanna, former CIO, our last guest, talked about challenges in IT and adoption of emerging technologies, talent, lack of diversity, lack of inclusion. So a lot of engagement, communication, catalysts behind slow adoption of technology. In terms of cultivating a culture of innovation, where you can reach, hopefully, your employees' full potential, what are some of the challenges you see as you advise companies? Why are they stuck? How can they pivot to a more iterative, more experimental mindset in order to foster greater innovation?
There's a good parallel there, actually, you mentioned innovation, between the conversation that generally happens about innovation in companies and the conversation that happens about why you're stuck with your engagement practices. The reality in most organizations is that they simply don't tolerate failure. And so by not tolerating a fail state, you can't ever have true innovation. Innovation can't exist in an environment in which there's no safety net around the concept of failing, because to even use the word experiment suggests that there's a high risk that the experiment's going to fail. Sure. And so we look at our culture the same way that we look at our innovation practice. Everything we do is an experiment. It has a risk that it won't work and that it will fail. We encourage our people to look at the world that way. We believe that if a significant percentage of our experiments aren't failing, we're not pushing the limit far enough forward. If you're saying, oh, we're doing an amazing job, 100% of our experiments succeeded, you're not actually experimenting. You're just doing known stuff slightly differently. So for us, whether we're talking about culture or we're talking about broader innovation, the question is, how do you build a culture that not only supports the idea of failure, but embraces the idea of experimentation?
That's a great point.
So, related to that, as we're talking about experimentation and these innovation programs that you're part of, everybody wants to do innovation. They try to get something up there, but how do you make it last? How do you embrace it? How do you actually embed it into the culture? Because you guys have done that successfully and scaled it out and over the period of 20 years.
I think that the question about making it last is a question about, again, about making it a cultural value. So we see in a lot of organizations, and sometimes we get called in to help them with these efforts. They, they'll have a CEO who hires a chief innovation officer and then says, I want 4 innovations a quarter. You can't buy innovations by volume load. It doesn't
I was going to
work.
ask you how you metric this, right? Like, do you get bonus on
I
innovation?
think that's actually,
is that a
that's
big innovation,
problem, right?
Small innovation?
Right. 4 big innovations and 2 small innovations. By the pound.
It's like I'm ordering
kilograms. No conversion to kilograms.
Fast food order.
Yeah, kilograms, yeah. I think it's the same answer in a way, which is that if you look at this as a short-term thing, oh, we're falling behind on innovation, we need to catch up, then you're looking at it from the wrong perspective, because this is a cultural value. You are an innovative culture or you're not. And it comes back to some of the things like being able to support people running experiments that might potentially fail, but it also comes back to a sort of overall attitude and culture around the idea of innovation. You get a lot of very controlling top-down hierarchical organizations that will never be innovative, because that top-down focus limits the creativity of the people who might create bottom-up innovations. And so we think about things like the idea that ideas can come from anywhere in a company, so that anybody in the organization may have innovative things that they've come up with or creative solutions to problems. And these can be creative solutions to internal cultural challenges. How do we engage people more? How do we increase the diversity of our team? They could be innovative solutions to problem things or to product things. How do we evolve our product to the next generation? But if you embrace the idea that those ideas can come from anywhere in the organization, then you quickly see that the traditional top-down hierarchical control won't work, because it limits the bottom-up innovation of those kinds of ideas. And we often look at this from the perspective that you need to have top-down support for that. It's what allows the bottom-up to grow. So from our perspective, you sometimes hear about this referred to as things like performance management, engagement management, innovation management. We object strongly to the word management used in there, because that suggests this is a process that you can actually manage. And our perspective is a little bit more like gardening. Think of it as an innovation garden or a culture garden. If I'm the gardener, I can't actually make the plants grow, but I can create the ideal situation for the plants to grow. And I can make sure they have lots of sunlight. I can water them. I can weed out the bad elements. I can provide fertilizer. And ultimately, I'm just creating a perfect environment in which ideas can flourish, or a particular culture can grow, or engagement can develop.
Jay, since you wrote the best-selling book, The Decoded Company, is there some lesson after the book that was published that you would wish you could put back into the book?
Yeah, there's a lot. It takes a long time to write a book, and then it takes a really long time to publish a book. And so by the time the book has come out, your whole thinking has evolved in so many different ways. And I think, we didn't actually talk that much about engagement in the book. It wasn't a term that came up that much, but in a lot of the conversations since then have really focused a lot around that question. It's become a burning question for a lot of leaders today. It's tied into other conversations that are very common, things like, what do we do about millennials? Which is really a question about, how do I engage these people who have a bit of a different worldview than I do? Or what do we do about diversity in our firm? Well, often the question about diversity is that you have self-selected through generations of hiring a group of people who essentially all have exactly the same thinking about the world. And so you haven't actually found ways to engage outside perspectives and viewpoints in a way that's meaningful and helps you to reshape some of the policies and thought process. And so things like unconscious bias become much more prevalent in those situations. As we were just talking about with Joanna, the reason for diversity is because it shakes up those perspectives and those viewpoints. We didn't touch on these topics in the book, and at the time when we wrote it, I don't think we really understood the true connection between what we were talking about and what ultimately becomes, at the end of the day, a question of engagement.
Sure, sure. And I know it's not a technology thing when we talk about engagement, but I have a 14, 10, and a 6-year-old, and I try to think 10 years from now at work. And certainly wearables is going to be part of, whether it's a watch, next-gen glass sensors, whatever, Fitbit. Will technology, based on your expertise, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even now with the corporate wellness programs that folks like Fitbit have, will it significantly, dramatically change the way we define engagement or measure engagement?
Yeah, I think so, in ways that maybe today we can't even necessarily anticipate.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the sad part about the wearables market today is that very few of them make it past 3 months before they end up in a drawer, and then nobody ever puts them back on again. And part of that is just that, you know, it's really awesome knowing how many steps I took today, but it's not really an actionable insight. If I hit my 10,000 or I don't hit my 10,000 or, you know, whatever, I mean, you might try some behavior change. Well, maybe I should walk a little bit more, but after a few days, that data just sort of fades into the background. What we haven't got to is that this isn't just a question about wearable sensors. It's important, right? I have my Apple Watch on. My Apple Watch has all kinds of sensors in it. Some of those sensors are fantastic and I use them all the time. Some of them, you know, maybe less so, but it's not about the sensors. It's about the insight that comes out of that data. That's really the important question. And it's one that has been largely missed in the market today. I think as AI gets better, as the algorithms get better, as we do a better job of interpreting that data, and especially at mixing that data up among the different sensors. So you think about something like HealthKit and the ability for it to have lots of health data points in it and not just your step count or not just your heart rate. It's across those data points that patterns start to emerge. And the same is true about engagement within an organization. When we start to think about engagement, we think you can measure people's engagement in the organization across lots of data points that their use of existing systems already produces enough of those points. And so if you're really looking at signal deviation from a normal, that's where you start to find those patterns. You just need enough data points to have that established normal. And whether they come from wearables or, you know, frankly, as much as we'd all love to see email go away, the reality is in 10 years from now, we will still be emailing. It might just be a little bit different or have evolved a bit. Or if you look at history, not evolved at all and be exactly the same thing we're using today. But either way, even just your use of something like email already produces lots of signals about the type of communication that you have with people, the length of those communications, the frequency of them, the tone of them. As sentiment analysis gets better, the sentiment of those communications. And, you know, as long as we can steer clear of the sort of big brothery element, which lurks over any conversation involving this stuff, but if we can sort of steer clear of that, there's actually a ton of value that can come out of that. And so, you know, I think the wearables are going to be factored into this, and we probably don't even understand yet to what degree they will be, but it's really just another set of data points in amongst everything else.
Absolutely, I agree.
Jay, this is great. Folks, we are listening to Jay Goldman here, co-founder and managing director of Sensei Labs with Click, co-author of the Decoded Company, and advisory board member for the Digital Health Coalition. You can follow Jay at JayGoldman. Thanks so much for being on the Disrupt TV show.
My pleasure, guys.
Thank you, Jay.
All right, take care. So cool. We've got some crazy stuff. It's Friday. This is awesome. I mean,
Ray, I scored a meal next time I'm in Toronto with Jay. So my Friday was already made. So this is great. I'm in too. You know, poor Jay doesn't know how much I eat, so he's going to be in for a surprise.
But it's Toronto. Toronto is a world-class city. There's awesome food in Toronto, and you just can't beat it. Well, we're waiting for our next guest. You know, we just want to tell folks, look, next week is Thanksgiving. There's no show, some program notes. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Disrupt TV Show. And then also, more importantly, we'll be back for episode 40. Can you believe it? We've done 40 episodes, Vala.
Unbelievable. And I think we're going to be past or close to 100 guests because, as you know, we have multiple guests on the show. So pretty phenomenal. It's 40 episodes since February. We didn't miss too many weeks along the way. So that's terrific.
No, and it's good. And we want your suggestions. We're going to be changing some of the show formats, updating this for the next year. We want to hear from you. So get to us at DisrupTV Show, or you can then send us direct DMs at Vala Afshar or at rwang0, RWANG0. And then next week, we do have some fun guests. We've got Alex Howard. I mean, the man, the public face of Gov2O, the Sunlight Foundation, all things good in politics. And so he's going to be coming and talking to us. And then, of course, Dr. Janice Presser. Dr. J is going to be talking to us about teamability, teaming, some of the things we learned at Constellations Connected Enterprise Program. And then, of course, our own Alan Lepovsky, another Toronto connection. There you go. You can just free me out of Alan, too, if you want to grab him.
That's right. At this rate, my breakfast, lunch, and dinner will be covered. I'm going to be in Toronto in January, so it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
Well, hey, you know what? If you ever decide to leave Salesforce, come be an Alice. That's kind of how we roll. We'll never go hungry. You might not make a lot of money, but we'll never go hungry. So that's part of the fun.
I'm already at 240. That'll get me to 300. So.
No.
No, go ahead. So we're waiting for Brian Fanzo to join us shortly. I know he's been periscoping the show. I think I see it on my Twitter stream. And
he should be jumping in soon. He said he's in, but we don't see him, so I'll make sure.
There he is.
There he is. Fabulous.
All right. We've got the fan though.
Technology. I love technology.
Technology.
Look at that. Look at that setup. We want this mic, man. We're gonna have to rejig our setup. Look at this thing.
Oh,
it's the podcast side.
That is awesome. Wow. Look at this? I got this little thing in my.
I've got the cheap $10 knockoff of the Apple, headset since I've lost my headset.
we clearly have not only a social video trendsetter, but audio studio pioneer. But
this counts. This doesn't even count either. I can put this thing on. It's horrible.
We're delighted to have Brian Fanzo, change evangelist, on our show. One of the most prolific personalities, thought leaders on Twitter. Brian's a social media technology and change evangelist. He was a social video trendsetter, #1 periscoper in 2016, over 1 million hearts and likes, and everybody loves what you have to say. Currently a change evangelist helping enterprise technology companies utilize new technologies such as social and mobile and analytics and cloud to be more productive, more involved in their communities, and ultimately become a social business. Brian is helping companies humanize themselves so that they can build brand loyalty and grow market share. He is a busy man. I mean, he's a busy man. So he hosts 2 weekly hangouts, #SBizHour, SBIZ Hour, and Cloud Talk, and 2 podcasts per week called Smack Talk, SMAC Talk, and iSocial Talks with an S at the end. You can follow Brian on Twitter at iSocial, SOCIALFANZ, iSocial Fans. Welcome, Brian, to DisrupTV.
Thanks for having me. I need to shorten that bio somehow. My new bio is just gonna say I'm a translator of geek speak and I like video. That's it. I'm gonna shrink that whole thing.
The geek speak whisperer. There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So hey, tell us before we start. Give us an update on your new book. You're gonna be a soon-to-be author, and we want to know about the book and when we're gonna get our hands on it.
So yeah, so I've never been one that loved reading books, so it took me a while to kind of get convinced to get into the writing a book myself. But yeah, it's called A Millennial Mindset. It'll be out in the spring, and really the byline is it's not the year you were born, but your ability to embrace change, collaboration, and community. And so it's really just about, this mindset. And even both guests prior to this, we're talking about, a digital native and understanding, how people are connected. And that's really what the book's focused on. So it's changed and morphed a lot through this year because I think with so much change and things that are happening out there, it's kind of natural for it to kind of change along with it. But yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a real focus on just the change needed to embrace technology today.
No, great points. And you've been talking about a lot of things. We came through a whole bunch of different events this week. And one of the topics that's hot for you is digital transformation in HR. So tell us a little bit, what's new and how is AI part of that future of work? How is it going to transform pieces? Is it going to take over? Is it augmented humanity? What's your viewpoint on that?
No, so yeah, on our podcast, which is called Smack Talk, which stands for Social, Mobile, Analytics, and Cloud. So it's a very geeky 30-minute show that we do every week. And I'm not one that kind of falls into a niche, so I didn't want to do a podcast that had a niche. So that's why it's such a wide range topic that we do. But we've been talking a lot about these industries. I worked in the Department of Defense for 9 years in cyber, and a lot of these industries that traditionally have been behind the curve, really, as we're moving forward now, can almost leapfrog. They almost forgot about digital. They really weren't leaders in embracing cloud technology. Security has been kind of their number one crutch, more so than I would say even a traditional concern. And I think for a lot of these brands and a lot of these ones that are going on today, these industries need to figure out, hey, how can I adapt? How can I not get left behind? I think HR, I think healthcare, I think government are all spaces that are going to look to places like augmented reality, look to places like cognitive computing, and saying, how can I integrate this into my workflow to provide a better value, not to replace something existing, not to completely disrupt. And I think HR is a really interesting one. Even this new consumer, this new, I don't want to say millennial, it's the new digital native. They want you to come to us, right? It's no longer about, hey, come to my website. It's the brand, the industry coming to those individuals. And I think it's an exciting time. And for some of these industries that maybe were behind the curve, I believe as they push forward, they're going to be able to leapfrog by looking at some of these things like augmented reality, cognitive computing, and even into virtual reality on how that kind of transforms even training in some of these groups. Yeah,
that's an excellent point. I agree. I was thinking of you this week. Tuesday, I was on a CNBC-like show in Canada called BNN. It reaches 6 million households. But what I found interesting is the anchors, John Ehrlichman and Amber Conmore, they Periscope, and they're using video stream behind the news desk. They're breaking news, so they're active on Twitter. It was great to see national figures who are on traditional television embracing social video streaming and being engaged and involved. So what are your viewpoints in terms of how do companies leverage social video streaming, not only to expand their share of voice and expose their thought leaders to the industry and customers and prospects, but also how they can bolster their event marketing? And if you're consulting with them, what type of key performance indicators are you sharing with them to prove that video social streaming is a significant technology that can really help them, gain mind share?
So, I love that. And, for me, and John Ehrlichman is, I'm good friends with him. I think he does an amazing job. And for me, it comes down to one word. It's called access. People right now are craving access to people, access to places, access to behind the scenes, access to the products, access to your leaders inside of your company. And when you're looking at access, the idea of giving real-time access is kind of scary. There's lots of things that are that worry brands, but it's no longer about can I give access or should I give access. It's about, hey, if I want to build trust and authenticity, you can't do this by putting a canned video on your website once a year. It's almost like the idea of doing employee surveys once a year. By the time that thing goes up, it's out of date. Just like a video, it says trust me. We invest in our culture. We trust our employees, but here's a bunch of actors that we paid to do our video about our company because we don't know who's going to be here. And so the word access is a big one. And interesting enough, one of the places that we find KPIs probably most beneficial using live streaming is actually in recruiting and in retention. Because today it's, hey, how do I keep my employees, how do I invest in my employees? How do I allow them to be thought leaders and empower them to have a personal brand? But at the same time, how do I show them that we invest in them and we trust our existing employees? And, I've worked a long time with SAP for, throughout their journey. And SAP, when I was over in Barcelona a couple weeks ago, they had probably 12 or 13 of their employees running their own Facebook Lives on their own department channels. And it was inspiring to see, because I did the Super Bowl for SAP earlier this year, and it was all, like, hey, third-party person, we can't figure this out. And now they're moving into this idea where they don't have to tell new recruits, hey, we trust our employees. Hey, we want to empower your personal brand. We want you to be the face of this brand. They can actually just point these existing Facebook Lives and Periscopes that are going on. So the word access is probably the one that's most important. And then I just came on as a strategic advisor for a company called Del Mundo. And Del Mundo's entire goal is linking true data underneath of these videos, because if you look at it, if you want to mature someone along in the sales cycle, if you get somebody that watches 2 of your videos for 20 minutes a piece, that much of dedication, that much investment in you, they're going to click on a link that you put paid social behind, or they're going to go to a webinar that goes even deeper down. And so if you're starting to able to really look at this data that you're getting in live video, the type of people, how long they watch. One of my favorite stats is repeat viewership. If you get someone that comes back show after show after show, you know that they're investing their time. More than likely, there's someone that you would want to be able to serve them with additional content. So we're really looking at this, hey, how do I provide access? And then let's really look at that data and drive business goals, because I'm not really doing live video for just for shits and giggles.
Hey, so hey, we're getting close to the 2017 predictions market. It's starting to get to that area. You're on top of a lot of cool trends that are happening between sales, marketing, customer service, and really seeing what's next with what people are doing. Why don't we share a little bit of what you see as hot for 2017, things that are just peeking around the edges before the whole prediction cycle comes in.
No, I love it. And I like to think, I get labeled as a futurist, and it's probably one of the oddest labels, because they kind of feel like a weatherman. If you predict far enough out, nobody will remember that you were wrong. But if but I will say, augmented reality and virtual reality have come out of nowhere. Really, in 2016, we thought of them as like, hey, they're pushing towards 2020. But I think now we're seeing strides, even with like the Snapchat spectacles, that are adding these elements of overlay, and like there's small segments. But I will make this prediction without question, that you cannot get into AR and VR if you don't have a live video strategy first. Because live video is understanding all of these, the trust, the different variables that go wrong, the technology side, all of the different storytelling capabilities. AR and VR take that to the max. I mean, 360 cameras, you're putting into account so many different variables, and these are going to be powerful technologies. But I believe in 2017, the brands that are going to look at AR and VR and actually implement them are ones that are already investing in live video. They're already investing in, how do I create a show? If I'm not creating a show, how do I sponsor other people's shows that are talking about similar topics, kind of like your show here? And I think that's one for me that's exciting. And I think the next piece will be, we're going to have a massive, if we already don't have it right now, a massive overrun of bad video content, right? The Cisco stat is by 2020, 81% of internet traffic will be video, but nowhere does it say what percentage of that video will be any good. So I think we're going to see a trend in 2017 with kind of looking at video and saying, what makes good video? It's no longer about perfect production. It's no longer about, let's do jump cuts and all of these things that takes out 3 months or 4 months. I think it's about listening to your audience, understanding where they're at, and then providing video content at the right time. Sometimes it's live, sometimes it's produced, sometimes it's taking something you already did and putting snippets up on different channels. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But yeah, without question, if you're not thinking live video today, don't even start thinking AR and VR.
Hey, one of the things that's important, we're seeing a lot of interest in live event marketing. That's a big topic where people are jumping in. But the other piece, I think, what do you think about authenticity? The thing about live video, there's a tremendous amount of authenticity, and people jump in and say, wow. That's a big part of that, wouldn't you say?
Without question. I think the most powerful phrase on live video is saying, I don't know. Because if someone asks you a question in the comments or while you're streaming, they can see your reaction. Unlike every other medium, if someone writes your blog post and calls you out, they don't see your instant reaction. You might go punch in the wall and then reply to the comment and say, thank you for your kind words. Like, I respect everybody's decisions. But we can
neither confirm nor deny that statement.
Yes, exactly. But on a live video, as soon as they ask you a question, as soon as something happens, your reaction action is immediate. And there's so much powerful that, but there's also that can worry somebody. If you're not able to say, I don't know, and all of a sudden you start going, well, and you start making something up, it's evident, it's apparent. And so I talk to people, and if you can say, I don't know, it adds validity to what you actually do know. So if you're on live video and someone asks you a question that you don't know, technically by saying, I don't know, actually increases their trust and authenticity with you. And I think that's huge for speakers. I think it's huge for events and brands that are really trying to break down this barrier. Nobody today wakes up in the morning and says, what's my favorite brand posting on social media? But they will say, hey, these are brands and employees that I trust. These are people that I believe can say I don't know, that understand the importance of sometimes saying I don't know and sometimes saying, hell yes, I know, and I believe this 100%. So I'm excited to see where this goes, but it is scary for so many. But I think most people that are scared are either seeking perfection, which is impossible, or they're too afraid to expose the fact that they don't know everything, even though your consumer already doesn't believe that you know everything.
So what do you do? Do you suggest an I don't know with a deflection, like, I don't know, but what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me get back to you. Or the best one, DM me your address or send me a message with your email address. I'll follow up, because now you've continued the conversation onto somewhere else where you can add in a support component. You can provide that additional value beyond video. So for me, I'll even do for Periscope, because so much of my audience is on Snapchat. I'll say, hey, send me a Snapchat with that question so that I can capture that. And then I'm going to get someone on my team to come follow up and add additional information.
So see, this is the beauty of what you do. I mean, you're talking about continuous engagement. That is engagement progression, and it allows people to carry further the conversation instead of just cutting it off. You're actually bringing people more into the process, even with an I don't know. I mean, that's the beauty of this.
Right, and how perfect is that? And and Vala, like you said with John Ehrlichman, these are people oftentimes now that are, I would say, celebrity status, or what would be quote unquote untouchable. Like, I would dream to have the opportunity to get this access to them, but the reason that they're embracing it is because they are real, they are authentic, and they're realizing, if I want to stand out from the noise, it's no longer about having the loudest microphone. It's about having a microphone that people are willing to turn on over and over and over again. And that's because they believe that you can say I don't know, or you can say I do know, and you give them access to things they can't get anywhere else.
Absolutely.
Or the biggest badass microphone, like the one we're seeing.
Yes, my big podcast microphone.
We're getting these microphones next year, Mel.
We are. So I do get up in the morning looking to see what Ray has to say on Twitter.
Me too. I mean, I think we all do that with Ray, right?
And I love the fact that you Periscope a stream, taking questions on Snapchat, and then reply on Twitter. So that's pretty awesome.
That's the life cycle, right? I go to where they're at and make sure that I engage. And I can tell you, for me, I even, when I get people to share a broadcast to Twitter, right, then I add them to a private Twitter list. I then can understand what type of content they're sharing, what kind of questions they're actually asking. I then do a broadcast to answer those questions. I mean, this is simple. They ask, we answer, right? That's what we're really in this business to do. And if you're able to start understand where they're having the conversations and listen to where they're at, it's not about the new shiny object. It's saying, where are they talking today and where are they talking about going tomorrow? And that's really what I focus with a lot of the brands that I work with.
Oh, yeah, that's great. That's sense and response.
Yeah, this is why emotional intelligence is so important. This hyper-connected, knowledge-sharing economy, it's great that you're smart and you're book smart and IQ, but it's that EQ and also sweat equity. I mean, all the stuff we're talking about, this is hard. This is hard work, friends. People think like being social and connected and accessible, it's easy peasy. It's not. No. But it's perhaps the most rewarding thing you can do, because your personal learning network will boost you in ways that you can't possibly imagine.
Yeah, I think one of the things I think is probably, if you're looking at social or video and you feel like it's such hard work and it's too much of a grind, ask yourself if you're truly being yourself on social and on video, because it was hard for me early on, and then I switched. And the greatest compliment I can get after every presentation and keynote I get off the stage, someone comes up and says, you're the exact same person online as you are offline. Because there's no way we could do the amount of content, do the amount of shows, do the amount of things we were doing if we had to actually be someone that we were not. That's so much more work. I could never do half the stuff if I had to do if I was trying to be someone else. And I think that's where some people get overwhelmed. I say, if you suck offline, offline, you're going to suck online. So if you suck, don't be yourself online. But everyone else, be yourself online. And it gets
But the opposite of that is also true. If you're good in life, you will be good online. So,
I agree.
So, all right.
On this, hey Brian, thanks for being on the show. We
Thanks,
love
guys.
having you. You're an awesome regular, and more importantly, folks, check out A Millennial Mindset when this book comes out. It's going to be hot. Follow Brian at iSocialFans. You can always catch something interesting, and of course, check out where all the cool events are because Brian's always at something definitely hot. So, thanks a lot for being on the show.
We are going to get a signed copy, right?
Yes, of course. Of course.
Nothing like putting your guest on the spot at the end.
For you two, anytime. For everyone else, I'll give them
I don't know. Why don't you DM me later?
Yes, actually, yeah, I don't know. That's what I should have done. I don't know.
I'll Snapchat you my address, but
There you go. I love it, guys. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Welcome, folks. It's Friday. It's DisrupTV Friday, and welcome. So remember, quick reminders: no show tomorrow, but no show next week. It's Thanksgiving. Please go out, say hi to a family member, enjoy yourselves, and be safe. And more importantly, we will catch you in 2 weeks' time for episode 40. Alex Howard, Dr. Janice Presser, Alan Leposki, all in one big show. And stay safe, everyone.
This just came to me, but I see some fantastic regulars who watch Disrupt TV through my Twitter stream. We got to find a way to get you guys on the air to say hello to us before year end. So it's just, we appreciate the fact that you spend consistently spend Fridays with us, like Zachary Jeans and others. So thank you for watching.
Hey,
Ray and I really appreciate it.
That's a great idea. Maybe what we do on a recap show for the end of the year, we'll just get some guests on and do an open hangout. I don't think there's a limit to the number of folks that can join a hangout. Not that I know.
Yeah, we'll have our producer figure out, but Shelly Lucas and Zachary Jeans and there's a bunch of folks that we see consistently
every week.
Yeah, and we do appreciate it. So we'll find a way to get you on the show.
Yeah, and Steve and a whole bunch of folks. All right, cool.
Yeah, Scott Allen, Mark Orland, all you guys. Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.